There were very chaotic scenes in Gaza earlier today as the latest hostage release from there got underway. Hamas releasing, in theory, 8 hostages this Thursday. 3 of them Israelis, the 5 others are from Thailand. Now, Israel, for its part, is also due to release another 110 Palestinian prisoners. This is the third exchange since the first phase of a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip took hold earlier this month. The truce aimed at winding down, of course, the deadliest and most destructive war ever fought between Israel and Hamas. Now, in the latest media reports from the Middle East, we are hearing that the Israeli hostages Arbel Yehoud and Gadi Moses have both been handed to the Red Cross, and that the third hostage is now on the way to the hospital. We're going to talk more about the details of all of this with our Doug Herbert, who joins me on set. Doug, what more can you tell us?
Significant releases today. Obviously, this has been an extremely fragile, laborious ceasefire, especially these hostage releases. In this initial 6-week phase, you're supposed to have 33 Israeli hostages released in return for hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. What's significant, perhaps the most significant here today, is one of the hostages that has been released, according to photos released by the Israeli Defense Forces, is Arbel Yehoud, which is a 29-year-old female civilian hostage. Now, she had been abducted from her home in Nir Oz, which was near Israel's southern border with Gaza, and her partner, Ariel Cunio, remains in Gaza. We don't actually know what his fate is at this time, but her release has become a real litmus test of the holding power, the staying power, and how and of the terms of these hostage releases. Because Yehoud, she was supposed to be, Arbel Yehoud was supposed to be released last Saturday. You'll remember there were 4 soldiers, female soldiers, released on Saturday, the 25th of January, as part of these staged releases of hostages. However, she was not released at that time, and there were questions over what was going on. And as a result of the fact she had not been released, as expected, last Saturday, the Israeli army actually held up the planned return of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians being able to return to their homes in northern Gaza. That is, until they made it a real sticking point. Until she was released, they were going to continue to maintain their patrols along the so-called Netzarim corridor, not allow those Palestinians to return to their homes that they had to flee at the very early stages of this war. So the fact she's released today, presumably, we now have seen from the time that it was absolutely confirmed that she would be part of this latest release, those Palestinians were allowed to begin flowing back through that corridor to their homes in northern Gaza. We've seen up to 376,000 reports have so far returned to their homes. But purely on the emotional level, obviously, this is a really big deal. Today's release, obviously, it includes 8 hostages altogether, right? There are the 3 Israeli hostages, including 2 civilians and 1 soldier, who was Agam Berge, who was released earlier and is now reportedly in the hospital, just being taken to the hospital there in Israel for the medical checks that are now obligatory for all released hostages. Their conditions vary enormously. But what you'll notice from these images come with a big disclaimer and caveat. We're a news channel. We want to bring people the live images direct of events as they're happening. This is a momentous event in the context of the ceasefire, but we need to also understand that this is a very carefully staged handover. What do I mean by that? An orchestrated handover, very theatrical. What you see here is Hamas basically sending a very clear message. It's trying to assert its authority. We see in the last releases on Saturday, which were actually on Palestine Square in Gaza City, and these are apparently today's releases right by the home of Yahya Sinwar, who was killed, the head of Hamas, who had been targeted and killed by Israeli forces, but symbolically very significant. We see masked gunmen, literally these hostages, as they're released by Hamas, being paraded about, used for propaganda purposes, in a sense, to send a message, a dual message, both to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that, no, Prime Minister, as you can see, we are here, we are still strong, we are still very much present, we are visible, we have not been destroyed, as you made one of your war aims. So this is in a sense, a shot across the bow to Netanyahu's vows that he would annihilate Hamas. We're here. We're here in our mask, we're holding our guns, and there's also a lot of Palestinian civilians. This is chaotic. There are crowds surrounding these hostages as they're handed over to the Red Cross officials. So the staging of this, and I have to use the word staging, this is meticulously planned. It looks chaotic, but the overall message is we are still here, we're not going anywhere. And the message also, not just to the Israeli audience and not just to Benjamin Netanyahu and his leadership, but also to Palestinians at a moment where the future governance of Gaza is being negotiated, or is going to be in the next phases of this deal negotiated. They're sending a message that, under the terms, it's foreseen by the U.S., its allies, Israel, perhaps there could be some form of Palestinian Authority governance. Israel's not really on board with that yet, but the Palestinian Authority, based in Ramallah, based in the West Bank, would somehow, at least in an interim phase, have the governance of a future Gaza. What this implies is Hamas is saying, we are still here, and we will have to factor into any equation in future governance. You have not annihilated us. So when I say that you have to take these pictures in context, it's very, there's an emotional element today, obviously, to the release of these hostages, which have been coming in dribs and drabs. Israeli families waiting, and this is an amazing emotional release for them. But at the same time, Hamas seizing this opportunity to send a very strong propaganda message to Israelis and to Palestinians. Don't count us out just yet.